I mentioned that Pauline Hanson has been sick with a terrible virus, but she's made her way to Cloncurry. She's also issued a press release saying that she'll be absent from Senate estimates. I was amused at her comment. Senate estimates, she said, happens once every 4 months, whereas this is a 1 in a 500-year flood, and I intend to ensure the people who need help get help. She said she makes no apologies for putting Queensland farmers and flood victims first. Thank God for that. And as I said earlier, Pauline, good morning to you.
Good morning, Alan.
Can I just say this, and I made this point to Scott Morrison yesterday, politicians normally get nothing but criticism. I mentioned earlier, and you wouldn't have heard my comments, that as part of my speaking to you this morning, I received a briefing note from your Chief of Staff, James Ashby, and I have to tell you it is absolutely outstanding. It is a magnificent overview of the crisis that you confront. He did tell me that you flew to Mount Isa. He drove through the McKinley Shire and made the point that, you know, while they weren't flooded, they still had about 28 inches of rain. And then he just said, he talked about 50-knot winds, the temperatures dropping from 40 to 15 degrees, and cattle, he says, simply dropped dead where they stood. It's just tell me your impressions. I know you haven't been there long. Your first impressions.
Well, flying in, I didn't know what to expect. Anyway, we drove straight out from Mount Isa to Cloncurry, and it's about 800 kilometres. Julie Creek, where I am now, is about 650 kilometres from southwest of Townsville, and it's called the Outback. It is the Outback. So it's an area that is virtually flat. There's not much of a hill at all. It looks beautiful and green, but when you actually drive along, you can actually see the dead cattle lying in the paddock. I went to the town of Cloncurry. I actually spoke to the locals there. I had a great talk with the mayor. The mayor wants to give his thanks to everyone. He said it's been unbelievable.
That's Greg Campbell.
Coming through. That's right, Greg Campbell.
Yep.
He said the support has been absolutely amazing. He's tired. He's got his own property with his cattle and his own problems, but his main concern is for the town and for the people. It's amazing the people here, they put everything on hold because they're more concerned with their neighbours and the friends. And talking to a farming family, as I said, they've lost about 100 head of cattle. You've got women and possibly the children are going in to see what funding they can get from either state or the federal. It's mainly the state hub here that they're looking after for the funding. And the men are staying home and trying to do the clean-up. They can't come to grips with doing the administrative work and filling in the paperwork. They're leaving that to their wives. The family's main concern, I think, is making sure that they can cope with if there's the problem that I'm hearing is that they think that later on down the track that everyone's busy at the moment, but you might have mental problems and possibly, could even be suicides later on if we don't keep a finger on the pulse here. And speaking to some of them, and one fellow said, look, we don't want the counsellors coming here. He said, all we need is to see our kids. And he said, because these people that fly in counsellors, they don't know what we're going through.
Yeah, that's right.
They're a tight-knit community. There are people that actually pull together. And to listen to the helicopter pilots, and they're actually relentless in continually, in that plane flying as in the helicopter flying.
Yeah, they're heroes, aren't they? James made the point, which I'll repeat again with you in case people missed it earlier. James Ashby, Pauline's Chief of Staff, made the very significant point that the Department of, this is awful to talk about at breakfast time, but this is the reality that families are confronting. The Department of Agriculture and Fisheries have stated no more than 5 beasts per hole. Now, we're remembering there's 500,000 plus dead, 30,000 sheep, stacks of kangaroos, no more than 5 beasts per hole around property because of the risk of bloating and exploding carcasses. Mass pits can only be dug if they are away from people. Pauline, a lot of the dead animals have been swept into the river system, but when you fly over in the helicopter in the daytime, how bad is the incidence of dead livestock?
Well, we stood beside one fence line yesterday, and there was about 100 head of cattle all piled up together in the corner of the fencing. So there's about 100 there.
And the smell?
Cattle line, unbelievable. Absolutely, so.
And how the hell do you get? I mean, I know the Army. James wrote here, and I've spoken to farmers. I'm like you. I'm talking to these farmers all the time. The Army have been fantastic. Volunteers have been fantastic. But we're talking 500,000. How the hell do you dispose of these bodies?
You can't. They're decomposing now rapidly because of the heat. The whole fact is that they say...
And that's a health risk then?
They won't. They've flown people in to determine the water. The artesian basin is quite low from here. It's clay base. Further north you go, it's different. So digging holes, especially around houses, they will allow up to 10 or 15, closer to housing, but they limited it because it could actually poison the water in the water, then they'll have health issues. If it's further away from the house, not near the water, not near artesian bores, the artesian basin or the aquifers or the bores, they will actually mass grapes. The problem now is they don't have the manpower and they don't have the equipment, and it's still too wet, so it's boggy.
That's it.
The big problem that they have now is that the cattle won't drink the water.
Correct.
They've got paddocks full of water, but the water's dirty.
Correct.
So the farmer now has to find clean water and get it up from the bore.
See, that's a very good point. That is a very good point. That's a very good point. Look, we could talk all day, but just before you go, I just want to shift over to the coast, if I might, because when I was to talk to you last week and then you were ill, you were making the point that a number of businesses in Townsville are learning that their insurance doesn't cover flood.
Yep.
What's the predicament there?
Well, they're not going to get any assistance or help because it's where the situation is. A lot of people can't afford insurance. It's just ridiculous. It's off the Richter scale for a lot of people to actually get insurance. And then when they read the fine print, there is no insurance on these small businesses because they won't offer it for flooding. So a lot of businesses are really struggling up here. It's something I've got to talk to the Prime Minister about. There should be a package for it because a lot of the businesses were shut down and they sent their people to work, help clean up their the neighbourhoods and helping other people clean up their mess. It's a hell of a mess up here, Alan, and I thought I'm more beneficial up here. I thought in some ways coming up here that I'd be actually like one of these politicians. So, we only see you when, politicising the whole lot. But I went to the local pub last night and we had a meal there and talking to a lot of people came up to me. And then I had a group of 10 came in. They left a birthday party, heard I was in town, came in. That's when I got to talk to the helicopter pilots. They were just so grateful to know that someone's here. And I've got to say, talking to the mayor and everyone, they are so grateful with the PM going up there.
Yep.
Coming up here, they feel that he is so sincere. They're so appreciative to know that someone really cares. And I'll tell you what, Bill Shorten, Labor Party, Greens, don't show your face. It's in this part of the world.
Yeah, Karen Phelps worrying about Nauru and Manasila.
And I'm in Julia Creek. Just over 500 people here, fly in, fly out doctors. They're grateful. They're great doctors, but fly in, fly out. And here we are with these political parties, opportunists, worrying about other people that have one doctor per 7 or 8 refugees, and we're worrying about their health. I'm disgusted with it.
And Julia Creek can't get a full-time doctor. All right, but look, I'm sure they're grateful, and thank you. And I just wanted to congratulate you and your Chief of Staff. His briefing note is outstanding. And indeed, I would rework it, Pauline, and release it as a press statement. I think all of Australia need to read that kind of information. It's a wonderful and tragic insight, but a wonderful insight indeed. Thank you for talking to us.
All right. Thanks, Alan.
All the best. There she is, Pauline Hanson.